In the autumn of 1833, a 14-year-old boy stepped off a ship onto a Philadelphia dock. His father had died 3 days after landing. He had no money, no family in America, and no plan. Only a sister, a handful of tools, and a piece of advice his father had given him before the crossing. A skilled toolmaker, the old man had said, can always earn a good, honest living. The boy's name was Henry Diston. He remembered that advice every single day for the next 45 years. He built the largest saw factory in the world from a rented shop the size of a garage. He built an entire town for the people who worked there. Houses, schools, a library, a music hall, a park along the river. He did all of it. And then, in 1955, the family he left behind sold every piece of it. This is the story of what Henry Diston built, and the story of how America took it apart. His father died 3 days after they landed. 3 days. They had crossed the Atlantic together, Thomas Diston, his 14-year-old son Henry, and a 16-year-old sister named Mariana. And then the old man was gone. Apoplexy, the doctors said. On a Philadelphia dock in a city where they knew no one, with no money and no plan. Before the crossing, Thomas had given the boy a single piece of advice. He said it the way working men say the things they most believe. A skilled toolmaker, he told Henry, can always earn a good, honest living. Henry Diston carried that sentence for the rest of his life. It became the only inheritance he had. He answered an advertisement for a sawmaker's apprentice. On the floor, with his hands, he learned the trade. 7 years of hard work. Then, the Depression of 1840 hit and the firm failed. The owner had no wages left to pay. So, young Diston took the tools and the stock in place of what he was owed, the only pay he would ever collect from someone else's business, and opened his own shop on Bread Street. 1 room. The floor was bare wood. When he worked, the small room filled with the smell of warm steel shavings and fresh sawdust. Sharp and clean, the particular smell of something being made rather than bought, borrowed, or inherited. But there was one decision Diston made in 1855 that his competitors would never recover from. We will get to that. First, you need to understand what he built. Within a decade, the rented shop was too small. Within 2 decades, all of Philadelphia was too small. Here is what Diston understood that no one else in America did. Every sawmaker on the continent was buying steel from England. Sheffield, in Yorkshire, was the metallurgical capital of the world, the city where steelmaking knowledge had been refined across generations, passed from craftsman to craftsman, father to son, never written down and never exported willingly. American manufacturers depended on that knowledge crossing an ocean, on shipping schedules, on British pricing, on supply chains entirely outside their control. Diston changed all of that in 1855. He went directly to Sheffield, not to buy steel, to recruit the men who made it. He brought crucible steel workers across the Atlantic, the same craftsmen his competitors depended on from a distance, and built the first furnace in the United States dedicated entirely to producing saw steel. He was not purchasing a material, he was owning the process. Every saw that left his shop from that point forward was made from steel he had specified, steel he had produced, steel that no competitor could replicate. His competitors had an ocean between themselves and their raw material. Diston had a furnace. Then the Civil War arrived, government contracts, Union Army demand, a federal tariff on foreign saws that made every domestic manufacturer suddenly valuable. By 1864, Diston was turning $35,000 in profit every single month. His competitors were still waiting on the ships. By 1872, he had outgrown the city. So he decided to build a new one. Tacony was nothing when Diston arrived. 12 houses, a river landing. A neighborhood at the end of a railroad line the city refused to extend, so passengers disembarked here and boarded boats downstream. Hotels and taverns served them. That was Tacony in 1871. Diston bought 390 acres of it. Over the next 2 decades, what he built was not just a factory, it was a theory. 64 buildings on 64 acres, steel plant, rolling mills, filing rooms, a power plant whose stack dominated the Tacony skyline for a generation. You could set your watch by the shift whistle. On mornings when the wind came off the Delaware, the whole neighborhood smelled of hot steel. That mineral sharpness workers' children would remember decades later as simply the smell of home. But Diston did not stop at the factory gates. 122 row homes for workers, a school, a library, a bank, a music hall on Longshore Avenue where P.T. Barnum lectured and Susan B. Anthony spoke, a park between the factory and the houses, so a man walking to his shift passed through trees before he passed through iron. He placed deed restrictions on every property, legal language written into the land, requiring the neighborhood to stay family-oriented in perpetuity. Those restrictions still hold today. They outlasted the factory that paid for them. If you want to understand what American manufacturing can be when done with intention, this is it. Subscribe before we go further. What comes next is where it gets complicated. Here is the thing about everything Henry Diston built. He died before he saw it finished. Those who inherited it had a choice. They made it well for a long time, and then they didn't. The company survived 2 world wars, the Depression and the rise of organized labor. It survived all of that. What it could not survive was 1955. Henry Diston died in 1878, aged 58. Tacony was still being built around him. His sons took over, then their sons. The company passed through hands that still carried the name, and for decades those hands held it steady. The Depression came. Factories across Philadelphia shuttered. Diston did not. The order books thinned, but the machines kept running and the workers kept arriving through the gates each morning, because a Diston saw was still the saw a carpenter reached for without thinking. Then came the war. In 1941, the rolling mills were converted. The same furnaces that had produced crucible saw steel for 90 years now produced armor plate for Sherman tanks. The same hands that shaped blades now shaped steel thick enough to stop a bullet. 8,000 workers on the Tacony waterfront, sales offices in 9 American cities, a branch plant in Canada. Historians would later record that Diston saws were among the finest made anywhere in the world. The Library of Congress would document the site as a place of national significance. 8,000 people, 9 cities, 115 years of building. And then, in 1955, the last members of the Diston family sat down and made a decision. It took about as long to make as it takes to read this sentence. 4 generations. That is what it takes. Not one bad decision, not one reckless heir. 4 generations for a family's bond with a trade to thin past the point where anyone still cares. By the early 1950s, most of the Diston descendants had no interest in running a factory. The company still worked, the brand still meant something, but the men whose names were on the letterhead had grown up wealthy rather than hungry. And there is a difference between a man who builds something and a man who inherits it already built. There were cash flow pressures. Post-war competition was reshaping manufacturing across America. And then there was an offer. H.K. Porter Incorporated. Pittsburgh, a holding company. Not a manufacturer, not a family that had ever stood on a factory floor and watched steel come out of a furnace. A holding company asks one question when it looks at an asset. Is it worth more running or worth more sold? Porter looked hard at Diston, the machinery, the land, the buildings, the brand, the entire complex on the Delaware River, and gave its answer. The family accepted. The consequences arrived quickly. Within a year, the variety of saws in the Diston line shrank. Quality dropped visibly. Workers who had spent decades on the Tacony floor watched machines get loaded onto trucks and driven south to a new factory in Danville, Virginia. The Philadelphia operation did not close all at once. That would have been clean. Instead, it shrank. Slowly, then faster. The sons had a choice, and for a long time they made it well. The grandsons made it too. It was the great-grandsons who finally decided the saw was worth more than the making of it. H.K. Porter would not be the last to make that calculation. Porter held Disston for 17 years, then sold it, 1972. Sandvik AB of Sweden, a Scandinavian steel conglomerate, now held the name of the man who had crossed an ocean to recruit Sheffield steelworkers to America over a century before. Henry Disston had gone to England to bring its knowledge home. Now a European corporation owned what that knowledge had built. Sandvik held it for 12 years, then sold it. 1984, RAF Industries, a reorganization. What remained was stripped down and rebranded Disston Precision Incorporated, the word precision now doing the work that Sons and World's Finest had once done. A smaller word for a smaller thing. 3 owners. 3 decades, each one less connected to saw making than the one before. Each sale translated the name a little further, from a family trade to a manufacturing asset to a corporate holding to a precision remnant. Each transaction moved it further from the Delaware River and the man who had dug those first foundation stones himself in September of 1872. The main factory building closed in 1983. 200,000 square feet of industrial floor. The last saw came off a Tacony line, not with ceremony, not with speeches, not with workers gathered on the floor. It came off with inventory paperwork and a padlock on the gate. 115 years, just a padlock. What happened to Tacony after the factory left is a separate story. But it is also the very same story. When the factory left, the neighborhood stayed. That is the cruelty of a company town. The houses Disston built still stand on those streets. The park between the workers' homes and the gates still runs the same line. The deed restrictions he wrote into the land still hold. But the wages stopped. The shifts ended. A neighborhood built around the certainty of work spent the next 4 decades learning what certainty feels like when it is gone. Tacony declined slowly, then completely. Urban decay is not an event. It is a subtraction. One family leaving, then another, one business closing, then the next, the slow arithmetic of a place losing its reason. By 2004, the Army Corps of Engineers was hired to finish what the holding companies had started. $10 million to demolish the main building, 200,000 square feet. Gone. The site sold at auction for $2.5 million. Plans were drawn for 407 new residences to be called Tacony Point. Something remains. The grindstones from the saw works, the same stones that had sharpened Disston blades for decades, were donated to the Tacony Baptist Church and built into the walls of its new wing in 1915. The stones that sharpened the blades are inside the building where the families pray. The Tacony Music Hall still stands. It is the only building in Tacony on the National Register of Historic Places. Something of Disston's intention survives in Tacony, but the factory that made the intention possible is gone. The Disston name still exists. Disston Precision Incorporated operates in Philadelphia today, making specialty steel products in custom lots. Disston Tools operates separately in Chicopee, Massachusetts. Both carry the name. Neither carries the scale, the workforce, the community, or the intention that the name once represented. The name outlasted everything that made it worth carrying. The Library of Congress holds the official record. 23 photographs, 4 data pages, survey number Pennsylvania 3923. That is the institutional memory of something that once employed 8,000 people and sustained an entire neighborhood. 23 photographs, and 4 pages of survey notes filed in Washington and rarely opened. In 2021, the Philadelphia Historical Commission designated the distant Tacony Industrial Waterfront a local historic district. 149 years after Henry Diston dug the first foundation stones there himself. The designation arrived 40 years after the factory closed. A designation, not a factory, not 8,000 workers, not a shift whistle over a neighborhood that knew the sound of its own name, a designation. What gets preserved is a question of what a city decides to remember. What gets forgotten is usually a question of what was too big to explain. Go back to the dock, 14 years old, father 3 days dead. One sentence carried across the Atlantic: a skilled toolmaker can always earn a good, honest living, and nothing else. Diston proved it true. 45 years, 8,000 workers, a neighborhood that still stands. He built something that outlasted him, outlasted his sons, outlasted the holding companies that sold it. The saws are still out there, in garages, in estate sales, on old workbenches. The medallion still stamped into the handle. The object outlasted everything. It is still sharp. Here is what I cannot stop thinking about. Henry Diston built deed restrictions into every house in Tacony, legal language that still controls what those properties can be used for today, over 140 years later. He thought about the future. He wrote it into the land. The question is not why he did that. The question is why the people who came after him stopped. If this kind of story is what you came here for, the ones that nobody made a movie about, the ones that are disappearing with the people who remember them, there is more where this came from. Subscribe. There is always more.